Hi, everyone, and welcome to Spotlight with Scientists in School. If this is your first time, welcome. I'm Betty Bacopoulos, and I get to have conversations with some pretty amazing scientists, the groundbreakers and the trailblazers, and today is no different. We're going to have a conversation with Landon Getz. He is a Vanier Scholar, a Killam Laureate, and he's working on his PhD at Dalhousie University. But it doesn't stop there. Landon is also the founder of CatCan STEM, that's Queer Atlantic Canadian STEM, and I'm excited to share his story. He joins us today from Halifax. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Spotlight. I'm here with Landon Getz. He is a PhD candidate at Dalhousie University in immunology and microbiology. Thanks for coming.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
You know, I should say you being a PhD candidate is just the beginning. You have so much on your plate. I honestly don't know how you fit it all in.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know either. So it's a lot sometimes.
Oh, you're a busy guy. So let's start right at the beginning then.
Sure.
Tell me, how did you know that science was going to be it for you? Like, how did this scientific journey begin?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because I think people ask this a lot, and you always have sort of a story that you like to tell, right?
Right.
And I do have one of those stories, but I think more realistically, it was just sort of something that I felt like I had to do, if it makes sense. Like sort of a societal pressure to go through STEM. So anyways, I always kind of knew that was the direction I was supposed to go in, and I did kind of want to too. And the story I like to tell people is that I used to be really into aquariums. And when as a kid, I was learning about how to start them and figure it out. And what's really interesting is that, fish secrete ammonia, which is toxic. And so there's a series of bacterial species that move the ammonia to nitrite and then eventually to nitrate, where it's non-toxic anymore, and you get rid of the nitrate by changing the water. Either way, the learning about this process of the changing in chemicals that I couldn't really see and how it allowed the fish in this aquarium to survive just really fascinated me. And that sort of really caught my attention and really made me interested in microbiology, which is where I am today.
You know, that's really interesting, Landon, because when I ask this question of people, the answer always has to do with water. It's like,
really,
I get the answer, you know what, there was a pond in my backyard, or, there was a pond really close, and I went in and I started getting things out of the water.
Right.
And yours is an aquarium story. It's pretty close.
Cool.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, cool. I guess like fundamental life-sustaining materials, so maybe that's why.
Yeah, so I guess, parents ask me all the time, how do I get my kids into science? I'll say, buy a house near a pond or get an aquarium.
Right.
Now, did you have people who supported you along the way, mentors, colleagues, anybody who really guided you?
Yeah. I guess like my current supervisor right now, of course, I didn't meet until I guess my second year when I took introductory microbiology, from which he taught. And so Dr. Nick Thomas has spent a lot of time with me. I've been in his lab since 2014, 2015. So I've been here for a little while. And his dedication to my training is unparalleled. So he's definitely done a lot. And obviously I've had lots of teachers in high school and stuff that had a lot of impact on my education and getting me interested in science, right? So it's hard to quantify exactly who it was, but there have been a number of people over the years that have helped keep me interested in STEM.
Now, I've read that you're a Vanier Scholar.
Yeah.
But you're also a Killam Laureate, which, to be honest, I had to look that up to see what the definition of a Killam Laureate was. And I'm going to read it out because I was really surprised. It says a Killam Laureate is described as someone who is a brilliant scholar, groundbreaking, paradigm shifting, and people who are constantly developing, discovering, mapping, and modeling the knowledge and solutions that will change Canada's future. Wow. So my question to you is, what are you doing at the moment that's going to change Canada's future?
It's such a big question, right? Because we don't really know what the future is going to look like. And I guess we all have impacts on the future in different ways. But I think I'm working with the Chief Science Advisor's office as a member of the Chief Science Advisor's Youth Council. And so one of my really deep interests as a scientist is this connection between the science that we do and how it impacts society, right? Often, I think scientists like to separate those things, right? I talk about the data. I'm a scientist. I don't do anything else. But of course, the science is integral to society in both the way it influences the way the science is done and how it influences society after it's been done, right?
Right.
And so I'm really hoping that, as I move through my scientific career, I can carry this interest and this idea forward and continue to explore the way that science interacts with society so that I can just sort of be aware of that in my everyday and also make other people sort of aware of that so that we can have more conversations about those sort of things. Because I think that sometimes when scientists pull themselves away or silo themselves, we end up with more issues that policymakers or politicians or other people have to fix, right? So it would be nice to have scientists a little more integrated into the whole picture. So anyways, that's sort of something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I'm really hoping that my my interest in it can be carried forward and used to help other people understand that as well.
I see that you've been doing a lot of talks lately about COVID and,
Mm-hmm.
and how that affects everyone as well right now and the vaccine trials. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you've done a lot of talks on that. Do you want to comment
Mm-hmm.
on any of that?
Sure. Maybe just briefly, I'll say that it's been what I feel like is a bit of a duty to take the knowledge that I have as a microbiologist and communicate to people about some of the ethical issues that might arise in some of these things. So an example that you bring up is that we talked about me and a colleague, Dr. Francoise Baylis, about how a Liberal MP wanted to allow human challenge trials here in Canada. A human challenge trial is essentially where we would deliberately infect people with COVID after giving them a vaccine to test whether or not the vaccine is functional. But of course, that means that some people would get a placebo and some people might get really sick, and vaccines may or may not work, right? And so me and Francoise Baylis pushed back against this idea, not necessarily because we don't think that there isn't a place or a time for something like that, but that the COVID-19 vaccine was happening so fast, right? We have unprecedented speed on that front, and we have a vaccine. So why would we infect people deliberately when we really don't need to, right? And so I think to sort of tie that in, taking this knowledge that I have and applying it in public spaces and allowing people to understand the interactions between science and society is really what I'm talking about, and something that I'm really hoping I can continue to do. Yeah.
Yeah. And what about your work with Vibrio Para hemolyticus? So that's what your PhD, what you're studying right now. What is that?
Yeah, so Vibrio is a group of organisms that lives in the ocean, and they're found pretty much everywhere. There's like 130 different species of Vibrio, and they're found pretty much around the globe. There's 4 of them that cause pretty nasty human infections, and Vibrio cholera is probably the one that people know the most, and it causes cholera, which is really a big problem in developing countries. Vibrio Para hemolyticus lives inside oysters. And it makes people sick when they eat oysters raw, if they're contaminated with Vibrio, of course. So if anybody that you know or yourself have eaten a bad oyster, it was my bug that probably caused your tummy ache. So we're trying to understand a little bit more about how the organism survives in the environment. We're doing really an organism Vibrio-focused research to understand how the organism survives in the ocean and how that then can relate to how it survives in oysters and how it gets into oysters, how it interacts with us, causes infection, and all those sort of things. So we're really taking a bacterial-centric approach to understand sort of the broad picture of how it survives and how it causes infection.
Now, is this what took you to the East Coast then? You need to be near water. And right, you grew up in Medicine Hat, is it?
I did, yeah, Medicine Hat, Alberta.
Yeah, so you went from Alberta and now you're on the East Coast. What's that like being out in Halifax?
Yeah, I absolutely love Halifax. The Nova Scotia is a beautiful province, and it's really, really fun to be here. And Halifax has this like really nice kind of small city feel where like it's bigger than where I grew up, which was a pretty small city. So it has sort of a city feel, but at the same time, it's not overwhelming like New York or Boston. Right. So I really enjoy that kind of slower, small city feel that Halifax has.
Yeah, wonderful. And now I'm going to have to take all this oyster talk and break the news to my family because we love oysters.
Yeah. Most oysters are totally fine, I should
Right.
say. Like most oysters are totally fine, but there are the occasional contaminated oyster that causes problems.
Now, you also did mention that you're on the youth council for Dr. Mona Niemer. What
Yes.
drew you to that, being part of that council?
Yeah, yeah. It was actually the same colleague, Dr. Bayless, who brought it up to me. And I think again, it's sort of that interest in sort of trying to tie together this sort of work that I'm doing in science to this work that I think is so important in society, right? So you know, Dr. Niemer is an incredible person, and she does incredible work, and she's very busy and sort of an inspiration to everyone around her, I think. And so being part of the youth council was just sort of an obvious thing that I needed to apply for. And I have the honor of being able to sit on the youth council. So I'm very happy to be there.
And how long is this term? Like, is it a few years or?
Yeah, it's a 2-year term. So we were appointed last year. So we have about a year left. But I believe it's sort of a bit on a rolling basis. So some people might stick around. It might be extended because COVID has really messed with a lot of things. But yeah, generally it would have been a 2-year term.
And you'd think that this would be all that you do, but there's still like so much more to dive into. You are a strong LGBTQ advocate, you know, equity, diversity, inclusion in science, and you're the founder of Queer Atlantic Canadian STEM. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because you know, I have a friend in the UK. He's actually the senior curator in charge of birds, the Natural History Museum. Dr. Alex Bond, and he is the founder of an organization called LGBT STEM. And he always likes to tell the story that the reason he founded LGBT STEM in the UK was because he was looking for people like him in science and couldn't find any. He said it wasn't until his sort of, I think, either late PhD or postdoc where they had a visiting speaker who was also a gay man, right? And so it was this first time he had met somebody like him in science. And I had a very similar experience where, you know, being here in Halifax, you know, I'm sure there were other queer people around. It's just that I didn't meet them or hadn't had an opportunity to communicate with them. And so my primary purpose for starting CAC and STEM, or Queer Atlantic Canadian STEM, was really to try to build this community here in Atlantic Canada of queer scientists, because there's many of us. We're just so siloed and isolated. And so yeah, that was really the idea, and that's where the idea to have the CAC and STEM colloquium, or the conference that we held, came from as well, just to bring us all together to have a day where we can just sort of meet each other, talk science, and feel included and welcome and safe as queer people in science.
You know, I actually read that the first time that you went to that conference in the UK was the first time, and this is a direct quote from you, the first time that you felt completely safe. And that wasn't too long ago, was it?
It really wasn't. No, it was 2018? I think it was 2018. Yeah.
You know, and that really surprised me that would be the first time that you felt completely safe. Why is that?
Yeah. I think the thing that's sort of hard to reconcile is that while in most spaces I probably am safe, because my identity is more of a hidden one, in the sense that I can blend in and be, you know, to everybody else a heterosexual man. It means that I don't always know if people have ill will towards people like me or me, right? Because of who I am. And so there's always this nagging question. You're at a conference or you're at a seminar or whatever, that if you were to bring it up, or if it was to come out somehow, that there would be a negative response to that, right? Especially in a place like science, which has, it's getting better, but still has sort of a white male heterosexual bend to it, right? And so being at this conference was just such an entirely different experience, because everybody was there because they were either an ally and completely supportive, or were looking for the same community that I was. And so entering into that space, that sort of nagging feeling of unknown was gone entirely, right? I walked into the Institute of Physics, where this conference was. There's a huge rainbow flag on the wall that they had put up, and that, you know, everybody was wearing little rainbow pins, and they're sort of dressed how they wanted to be dressed, and it was just incredible to sort of take off the shackles for a little bit and still be able to experience science and technology and really talk about all of these things without having the extra worry that I don't fit in.
You know, I read that rainbow flag is just like this beacon of hope and safety, right? And when you
Mm-hmm.
see it, you're just like, okay, I'm in a safe place. And you
Mm-hmm.
know what you said also, I had a conversation. I have three young teens at home, and they said,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when you're gay, you don't just come out once. Like you have to come out so many times. So yes, maybe your home is a safe place, but then you have
Yeah.
to tell your friends, and then you have to, you know, like you said, you
Yeah.
don't know every time you meet someone if you're going to bring it up and if it's going to be received well. Would you
Yeah.
agree?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Yeah. Yeah. I'm in a unique situation because I feel like my public profile has been tied to
Mhm.
my diversity, and I've been very clear about who I am. And I've done that in very intentionally as a way of trying to deal with the coming out issue, right? I don't have to do it so much anymore because the articles and other things are doing it for me. But you're right. Every time I enter a new space, you have to have that conversation in your head about whether or not you think the space is safe, whether or not you think it's okay to come out in this situation. And then coming out is as easy as saying, my partner does this, he is,
Right.
blah blah blah, right? And that's that moment where
Mhm.
you sort of come out. Actually, I have a story. I actually just had to come out at the blood clinic. I got blood taken for just routine checkups or whatever. And having a conversation with the nurse, she asked me who my common law partner was, and she referred to this person as a she. And I had to correct her
Right.
and say, his name is this, and this is his phone number. We're exchanging information. And that was a moment where I had to decide, is it worth it? Should I come out in this moment, or should I just go along with it? Right.
Right. And do you gain this confidence though as you've gotten older? Like it couldn't have been that easy. You said, I read, you knew you were gay from when you were very young. Was it as easy back then?
No, it certainly wasn't. So I didn't actually come out for the first time until I moved to Nova Scotia. It was when I was 18 years old. So I wasn't out in Medicine Hat, and partly that was because I was in high school, right? So being in high school means that you're trying to fit in, you're trying to navigate these social circumstances, and being in Medicine Hat is a relatively smaller city, like I said, a bit more conservative kind of bend, and so it means that I really didn't feel comfortable coming out in Medicine Hat, so I didn't. But since I have come out, my parents are very accepting. I have a great family. I've got lots of friends, good support systems. And so as I've built this support system, it matters less and less to me if somebody has some negative thoughts about me or my identity, because I have these people that I know are here to support me and care about me.
Right.
So it definitely has gotten easier for me because I have this support system.
Yeah, you have this community of people now that you know that
That's right.
support you, right?
That's right.
So I definitely want to take a few moments just to hear from you. If you're a parent or you're an educator, and
Sure.
listening, of course, would be the first step. Like we have to listen, but like, what are some steps, things that people can take away? How do we make it a safe space for young scientists?
Yeah, yeah. I think the primary thing that I've been trying to do, and then the thing that CAC and STEM is also sort of aiming to do, is to just increase representation. And so I think the some of the most important moments in my development as a queer person has been meeting and experiencing other queer people, right?
Mm.
And I think that those knowing that you could be a scientist and also be gay or a lesbian or whatever allows you to recognize this. It's sort of validating in a way, right? And so I think that for teachers and parents, if they can show kids that these people exist and that scientists aren't just white men in lab coats,
Mhm.
but they're also queer people, they're also Black people, they're also trans people. You sort of can show those kids that they belong there too, and that those spaces are also for them. And so I think that that's sort of, for me, representation is probably one of the biggest things. And then beyond that, it's just about being a bit more inclusive in our everyday lives, right? So being inclusive in regards to pronouns, doing your research and your work to make sure that the language you're using is appropriate and okay. And those kind of things I think are validating as well, because it shows young queer people that, that again, these spaces are for them, and that people are working hard to make these spaces for them.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Like, it really does take a lot of courage, and I'm just so happy that we have a platform like this to have these conversations. And
Yeah.
these are conversations we need to have over and over again. Would you say things are getting better? Is there a
Yes.
beacon of hope?
Yeah, I think they are. It's easy to be cynical and to find things that are bad or not great. But I think overall, morally, we have progression, things move forward. So I do think things are getting better.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule. I know you are so busy, and hopefully our paths cross once again. And the next time we do, I guess I'll have to address you as Dr. Landon Getz next time.
Hopefully, a year and a half.
Is that what you've got? A year and a half to go?
Roughly, yeah.
All right. Well, you better let us know when you get that under your belt. And
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, thanks so much for joining me once again on Spotlight with Scientists in School. And if you haven't heard, our workshops are now virtual. We have classroom and community workshops available. We have a 4-week STEM club and a program called Party Like a Scientist. Find out information on our website, scientistinschool.ca, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and we are new to Instagram at sci_in_school. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.